Well, our comprehensive and continuous coverage continues here from the Finance Ministry. Joining us now is the Economic Affairs Secretary, Mr. Shaktikanta Das. Mr. Das, congratulations to you as well, because as former Revenue Secretary, you also worked on ensuring the passage of the GST bill. What is this now going to mean as far as the macros are concerned, sir?
The GST, the passage of the GST bill, let me put it this way, is an outcome of the hard work put in by officers of the Revenue Department and the state governments together over the last several years. Now, what it means for the economy is that it is going to completely transform the way our economy functions. You have, as already stated, one India, one market, and more importantly, what GST will do is that it will bring in greater transparency, greater accountability into our economy, the way our economy functions. It's going to widen the tax net. It will also eliminate the burden of tax on tax. Whole India becomes one market. With the availability of input tax credit, the cost of production, the cost of production of various products will also go down because you have input tax credit. The credit will flow across states because India becomes one market. And because of this great amount of, all these measures put together, if you look at it, I think it will give a big boost to the real economy at the expense of the so-called parallel and the shadow economy.
Can you quantify that for us, sir? I mean, CII estimates have been 2% of GDP and so on and so forth. What is the assumption that you're working with if you talk about higher compliance, more efficiency within the system?
You see, experts have said that it will add by about 1.5% to 2% of the GDP. It will certainly, it will certainly give a big boost to the economy because your tax collections are going to become far more efficient. The leakage will go down, and with moderate levels of taxation going forward, when the tax levels get moderated, you will have naturally more of economic activity. You see, the other thing which GST will achieve is that by limiting the number of exempted goods, the list of exempted goods will be only confined to those which actually are essential for the common man, for the poorer sections of the society, like food items, etc. So when you do that, and when the list of exemptions gets moderated, gets reduced, and focuses only on the poorer sections and on the day-to-day common requirement of the common people, naturally you are creating the groundwork for a moderate rate of taxation. If you start giving too many exemptions, then you will have to have a higher rate of taxation. So therefore, going forward, I think it will widen the tax net. It will also, as we go about, it will moderate the rates of taxation. And in any case, the activities, unless you come into the GST network for any trader or for any business person or for any manufacturer, unless you come into the GST network, you will not get the input tax credit.
That's right.
So you become uncompetitive with other manufacturers.
You're right.
So this will increase the competitiveness of the Indian economy. And if I can just add one more point, I think you have to see demonetization, GST, and the big initiative of the government with regard to Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile. I think these three initiatives together, put together, are going to give a big boost to our economy.
Sir, let me ask you about what could be the next big trigger, and that has to do as far as NPA resolution is concerned. Whether it's the Chief Economic Advisor or it's the Finance Minister telling me in an interview a couple of days ago that this is a matter that is going to be addressed with a degree of urgency, that some sort of new mechanism for NPA resolution is on the anvil, on the cards. What is the thinking? Where do things currently stand, sir, as far as the Economic Affairs Department is concerned?
No, you see, the Department of Financial Services is working on it. Already the government has, the RBI has come out with the S4A mechanism and the SDR, CDR and other instruments and other procedures and systems.
But the feedback is that hasn't necessarily worked, so the need is to now either rework these schemes, bring in a new scheme. Where do things stand? You
see, let's also remember that there is an oversight committee which has been put in place, and the banks are being encouraged to identify the big cases and to bring it, to reach some kind of a restructuring, take a haircut which the banks can afford and bring it to the oversight committee. so that the oversight committee gives its seal of approval, the stamp of approval. It's it's okay on the proposals which the banks are bringing. So already,
is there also a proposal, sir, that while banks will take a certain degree of a haircut, that the government, if need be, will support also?
No, in the sense that the banks will have to do it. Government support to the banks will be only in the form of capitalization. If the banks require additional capital, the government will provide the required capital. But having said that, let me also mention that the capital will be provided based on certain performance index. You cannot go on putting taxpayers' money to recapitalize the banks. The capitalization of banks will take place linked to certain performance index, linked to certain settlement of certain big accounts and default cases. So it has to be performance linked.
So, these 50 accounts have already been identified by the government where the, of the stressed assets, etc. The oversight committee is already in place. How soon can we expect now to move on each of these accounts?
I think you will see, you will see in the coming months very fast, you will see good speed in the coming months with regard to the resolution of all these assets.
I understand it cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach either. It will probably have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. So is there also going to be, for instance, some sort of an ombudsman who will, along with the oversight committee, provide the political cover, so to speak?
You see, what regulatory or what other changes which government will bring about, that I cannot say at this point. Whatever changes are brought about, in any case the parliament is in session, so that will be announced by the finance minister in the floor of the house. So it will not be appropriate for me, and I cannot make those kind of statements. But you are right to the extent that each case is a different, has its own reasons of failure and has its own complexities. Each case has been impacted differently because of the change in the business cycle. A unit in the steel sector has been impacted differently, in a manner which is different from a unit in another sector. Then you have to also look at facts of each case, where it's a business failure, where it's a management failure, and what are the other reasons for failure. And then each case has its own peculiarity. So you cannot have a one-size-fit-all, one size that fits all. But yes, within the parameters which have been specified, there's a certain, space, there's a certain elbow room available. Within that parameter, within that elbow room, each case will have to be analyzed separately.
So would it be fair for me to say, sir, that on the priority list would be stressed assets within the steel sector, within the power sector, within the infrastructure sector, the EPC space? Those will be the ones that the government would like to tackle first before you talk about issues of willful defaulters and so on and so forth?
No, not like that. It's not a question of which government will choose, whether steel or power or this thing, but the fact remains that most of the big NPAs happen to be in these sectors. It is in steel, it's in power, it's in highways, because these were the sectors which face certain difficulties due to various reasons. And cases of willful defaulter, it's not a question of sequencing this first or this later. Wherever there is a willful default which has happened, parallel action will be pursued. Nothing is going to be slowed down because we are giving priority to, a particular number of cases. That does not necessarily mean that action on the other fronts, especially with regard to willful default cases, will be slowed down. Action on willful default cases will be pursued very vigorously.
So you said that the banks will be required to take a haircut, sir. The chief economic advisor in his interview to us yesterday said that that is really at the heart of the problem, that, and the fear of the 4 Cs, the courts, the CVC, the CAG, and so on and so forth. So how is this issue being addressed? Is it only being addressed by way of the oversight committee? How is this issue being addressed on how much haircut to take? What is going to be the exact mechanism of this?
You see, the size of the haircut will depend on individual case. It has to be a business decision by the banks. It has to be a commercial and a business decision by the banks. Now, the bank officials are encouraged to take decisions, and I think some time ago the banks had a meeting with the, a meeting was arranged between the Chief Vigilance Commissioner and the banks, wherein the CVC has very clearly explained that any bona fide decision taken, a decision which is well explained, well minuted, well recorded, well justified in the in the files or in the papers of the banks. There is no question of having any fear factor in that.
So when was this meeting with the CBC, sir?
This happened a few months ago. Now, oversight mechanism is just to provide an additional, additional layer of comfort to the bank management. So therefore, bona fide decisions, I think, need to be taken, and I am sure the banks will take, and the banks are moving forward in that direction. It's not as if the banks were not doing anything at all. The banks are moving forward in that direction. Now it's a question of implementation. There are enough instruments available. It's now a question of implementation by the banks, and the ministry is working very closely. The Financial Services Department is working very closely with the banks, and the regulator, the Reserve Bank of India, is also, I mean, they are very closely involved in the process. So I would expect in the coming months lot of matters to get resolved.
Okay. Will each of these require cabinet approval, sir, or how is this going to work? Because our understanding is that a cabinet note has also been prepared and so on and so forth. So where do things currently stand on this?
Restructuring of any particular loan portfolio does not require cabinet approval. This has to be a decision taken by the banks and their management. It doesn't need government approval or cabinet approval. So
you said that you expect this matter to be addressed with a sense of urgency, and you expect the implementation and the execution, the instrumentalities are in place, but you expect the execution to move very quickly on the ground. Would it be safe to say that early on in the new financial year, you expect us to get started on being able to address a large number of these accounts?
You see, look at it in the context of the government fixing various problems, various problem areas of the economy over the last few years. The highway sector problems were fixed. Several measures were taken to infuse additional equity, to change the promoter. Various measures have been taken. In the power sector, particularly in the distribution side, the Udaya scheme has been announced. In the steel sector, MIP and other initiatives have been taken. So one by one, the government is fixing various sectors. Government has come out with a package for textile sectors. For leather and for footwear, government is going to announce a package as stated by the finance minister in his budget speech. The legislative measures with regard to the insolvency and bankruptcy code, with regard to GST, which has now made a big, big step ahead. So government is slowly, not slowly, very steadily and consistently fixing various problem areas of the economy and taking necessary reform measures. The problem of twin balance sheet of the corporates and the banks, that still remains. The balance sheet problem of the corporates naturally, they will have to fix themselves. Where there is a interface between the corporate balance sheet and the bank balance sheet, that is NPA issue, there I come to the NPA issue. So the problem of non-performing assets of the banks is one of the highest priority items of the government, and it is receiving attention at the highest level, and there will be visible action in this regard in the coming months.